Hello, Anatomy. Welcome to our second video in our two-part video series on Chapter 9, the endocrine system. So let's jump right in. So we're going to pick up right where we left off. In this case, we're going to do the adrenal glands. So the adrenal glands, just to show you a picture, I'll put the slide back. So your adrenal glands sit on top of your kidneys. You have two kidneys in your lower back, and the adrenal glands are sort of like almost like little caps of tissue sitting on top of each kidney. There isn't a whole lot to them. They're very small endocrine organs. So I remember, first doing the adrenal glands in school and thinking, the adrenal glands, they produce adrenaline. I got it. But that's the more you learn about the adrenal glands, the more you realize they are very, very complicated organs, and they have lots of varied effects on your body. So let's jump right in. So the first thing I want you to understand is that your adrenal glands have two main regions. And the first region is called the cortex, which is the outermost region. And the second region is this middle region called the medulla. So you have the adrenal cortex and the adrenal medulla, okay? We're going to sort of break down the hormones of the adrenal glands by where they are produced first. So the adrenal cortex has, or again, it is that outer glandular region because it produces hormones. It has three layers. So mineralocorticoids, are secreted by the outermost layer. Glucocorticoids are secreted by the middle layer, and the inner layer secretes sex hormones. The adrenal medulla, that innermost region, is neural tissue, as in it's not really endocrine tissue, it's neural tissue mostly, and we'll get to that in a minute. Remember how the pituitary had the anterior and the posterior lobe, and the anterior lobe was endocrine and the posterior lobe was neural? Same thing kind of like with the adrenal glands. The cortex region is glandular, and the medulla region is mainly neural tissue. So if you look at a diagram, this is from your book. So the outer region is called the cortex. You have three main layers. You have the mineralocorticoid secreting layer, the glucocorticoid secreting layer, and the sex hormone secreting layer. Now, what these different hormones are and what they do, we'll discuss here in just a minute. And the medulla is this innermost region of the adrenal glands. Okay, so mineralocorticoids. Okay, there's so much to get into. So, the word minerals in the name, this word aldosterone is an example. So, your blood has electrolytes, has salts in your blood, and the electrolyte balance of your blood is largely regulated by your kidneys. Your kidneys, we haven't done your kidneys yet, but your kidneys basically filter your blood. And what comes out of your kidneys is eventually urine. It's what you urinate out. So in regulating the electrolyte or salt balance of your blood, that also regulates the water balance of your blood, right? Due to osmosis, water will go where there's more solutes, or in this case, more electrolytes. So for example, the kidney, if the kidney reabsorbs water, then there's less water in your urine. I think we discussed this briefly in the first video. If your kidney is controlling the salt movements of salt or electrolytes from your blood to your kidneys or back and forth, it's also regulating water balance. All right. So mineralocorticoids, like aldosterone, what they primarily do is they regulate the mineral content of your blood, like potassium, sodium, things like that. But they also are regulating the water balance of your blood sort of as a byproduct. For example, if your blood pressure gets too low, things like aldosterone and this hormone renin also affect your blood pressure. Let me phrase it differently. If your blood becomes dehydrated, there isn't enough water in your blood, that makes your blood pressure drop, right? So if your blood pressure drops, one thing your body does is produces things like renin or aldosterone to increase the water content of your blood, which increases your blood pressure. Okay, so the topics of mineral content of your blood, the water balance of your blood, and your actual blood pressure are all related. You probably had no clue that your adrenal glands also regulate your blood pressure, but they do. All right. This last hormone, ANP, atrial natriuretic peptide, that's a hormone produced by your heart. Now we're going to discuss your heart. Your heart inhibits things like renin, which would lower your blood pressure, right? Which kind of makes sense because your heart knows what your blood pressure is, right? So it's almost this negative feedback. Well, it is a negative feedback, antagonistic response, where renin and aldosterone, also regulate, again, your blood electrolyte balance and your water balance. Blood, or renin and aldosterone, can lower your blood pressure. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Renin and aldosterone can raise your blood pressure by increasing the water content of your blood, whereas ANP can lower your blood pressure by decreasing the water content of your blood. I'm going to say that one more time because I misspoke a minute ago. Renin and aldosterone increase your blood pressure by increasing the water content of your blood. ANP can lower your blood pressure, and that's produced by the heart. It can lower your blood pressure by lowering the water content of your blood. Remember how I said a minute ago the adrenal glands are really complicated, and that this is just one part. This is just the outer part of the cortex. So this diagram is from your book. This kind of summarizes that, and let's go through this. But this, again, this is a little overwhelming in its complexity. So say you have decreased sodium or potassium in your blood, right? Or you have decreased blood volume. Your adrenal glands produce renin, aldosterone, angiotensin 2 is another one that gets involved, which affects your kidneys, makes them reabsorb water, reabsorb sodium or potassium, which would increase your blood pressure and your blood volume. That's the left-hand side. And that, of course, that's caused by, that's a humoral thing. That's caused by a decrease in the blood electrolytes, or the electrolytes in your blood. So stress, the stress reaction can cause your hypothalamus. Remember, your hypothalamus controls your anterior pituitary to secrete the hormone ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone. That's one that we saw in the first video. That hormone can do the same thing with affecting your adrenal glands. It can stimulate the release of aldosterone or things like renin to do the same thing. Now, the counterbalance here is your heart can release ANP, which inhibits those hormones, which would decrease your blood volume, which would lower your blood pressure. Okay, it might be worth your time to pause the video or to look at this diagram in your book and just go through it, because there is a lot going on this diagram and in that outer layer of the adrenal cortex. Okay, so let's move to the next layer. Okay, now, I just kind of want to pause because this gets more complicated. So that middle layer of the adrenal cortex, let me just remind you. So what we just did was that thin little layer right there. The middle layer is the glucocorticoid secreting area. So you've probably heard of cortisone or cortisol. If you ever have like a really bad muscle spasm, they might give you a cortisol shot. If you have a bad rash like poison ivy, you might use Cortaid or hydrocortisone cream, which helps like put inflammation at bay, helps stop like the itching. So these are hormones. They're sort of like the opposite of the fight or flight response. The fight or flight response like increases your blood pressure, sort of stresses you out. These hormones, the slide says they promote long or normal cell metabolism. They help resist long-term stressors. So like if you have a rash, that's inflammation. That's your immune system inflaming your tissues of your skin. Cortaid cream or hydrocortisone cream inhibits that. So these are hormones. So think of the fight or flight response as a short-term response to stress, increase your blood pressure, increase your heart rate, helps your body, it increases your blood sugar levels to help you, if the rabid cheetah is coming toward you, you got to get away from it. Long term, that would be very negative for your body, right? So glucocorticoids like cortisone or cortisol sort of counter that. They resist the long-term stressors. It helps sort of chill you out, honestly. The hormone ACTH that we've seen it a couple of times, including the previous slide, that was released by the anterior pituitary, right, in your brain. And those hormones stimulate the release of glucocorticoids. All right. Okay, so the innermost layer of the cortex, now we are here, is the sex hormone secreting area. So you probably didn't know this, but your adrenal glands produce sex hormones like estrogens or androgens. Androgens are things like testosterone, male sex hormones. They don't produce a whole lot. Obviously, ovaries and testicles, your gonads, are the main organs that produce sex hormones, but your adrenal glands do too. Not very much, but they do produce a little bit, basically throughout your entire life. Okay, so that's enough for the cortex, right? So now we're moving, and just to show you where we are, now we're going to go down here in the medulla. Okay, so the medulla produce two hormones that you've heard before, epinephrine and norepinephrine. Epinephrine is just another word for adrenaline. These are called catecholamines. So these are hormones, these are part of your fight or flight response. We discussed this in chapter 7. Things like adrenaline or epinephrine increase your heart rate, increase your blood pressure. They increase your blood glucose levels, so you have more sugar available to your tissues like your muscles. They dilate the small passageways of your lungs, which help you take in more air as you breathe. This is the fight or flight response, right? Those hormones are produced by the adrenal medulla in your two adrenal glands. So this is another diagram from the book that I put in here. So, let me just say what I just said again. The adrenal medulla does the fight or flight response. Your hypothalamus stimulates your adrenal medulla to produce these catecholamines, increases your heart rate, increases your blood pressure, increases your metabolism. You get the idea. This is the short-term stress response if the rabid cheetah is coming toward you, right? Fight or flight, okay? Now, what I said a minute ago was the long-term stress response, which also does things like to retain sodium in water, to increase your blood volume, to increase your blood pressure, right? Because we're talking about stress here. It tells proteins and fats to break down into glucose, increases your blood sugar. But this last point here, to suppress your immune system, does that make sense to you? So we said how these mineralocorticoids do the deal with your blood pressure. The glucocorticoids, like cortisone or hydrocortisone, are the ones that sort of suppress that, or sort of like a resistance to stress. This third point, suppression of the immune system, again, this is why you use Cortaid on a rash, because if you have a rash that goes on forever, that's bad for your body. So cortisone or cortisol or hormones, these again are glucocorticoids that are, they're called stress hormones because they're produced in stressful situations, but they also in some ways limit the effects of the stress, and that they suppress your immune system. If you are stressed out, that much for a long, here's a different example. If you have surgery, right? If you have surgery, obviously that's a huge shock to your system. You are literally cut open. Well, after you have surgery, your cortisol levels or your glucocorticoid levels are going to be very, very high because, your body is healing. Obviously you had a stress, but you can't have that kind of response nonstop for a long period of time, right? If you ask yourself, why would your blood glucocorticoid levels be high? Well, they're high. Well, one, it could be like a cancer in your pituitary. Remember, your pituitary produces the ACTH, which simulates all this. If you have a pituitary cancer, you're going to have high levels of really any of these. But say you've had a traumatic event like a death in the family, your book mentions that, or you've had surgery, your glucocorticoid levels are going to be very, very high because that's a long-term stress situation. And you're going to do all the things, these 1 and 2s up here, but it's also going to an extent, suppress your immune system. Again, think about a rash taking over your body. Think of, if you have surgery and that area gets inflamed, well, for a long period of time, that's not a good thing. So your body kind of puts the brakes on that. Of course, over here, it's hitting the gas pedal, but here it's putting the brakes on to promote long-term healing, okay? I've been spending time on this because, again, glucocorticoids are called stress hormones because they're released in response to stress. but in some ways they help chill you out. I think your book calls them housekeeping hormones. Does your book use that term? I don't think I have it on here. Well, they promote normal cell metabolism, so they are, in a sense, housekeeping genes to help keep the stress response from going too much. Okay, so that's enough about the adrenal glands. Let's move on. So your pancreas is a really cool organ. So your pancreas, you think of it as a digestive organ, and it is. When we do the digestive system, we're going to see what it is. It has a mix of endocrine and exocrine functions. So to review back in chapter 4, I think it was, exocrine organs are ones that produce products through a duct. Like they have a duct that carries the product into your blood or wherever it's going to go. Endocrine organs, what we're doing right now, are ductless. They're ones that just secrete the hormones directly into your blood or into the interstitial spaces. When you hear exocrine, like with the pancreas, the exocrine functions of the pancreas are for digestion, right? The endocrine functions of the pancreas, which again is in your abdomen, right, is blood sugar regulation, right? You have these areas called pancreatic islets, which are sort of like scattered throughout all the exocrine tissues of your pancreas, and they secrete insulin, and they secrete glucagon. Insulin's formed by these cells called beta cells. Glucagon's formed by these cells called alpha cells. That's not the most important thing that you'll ever need to learn, but they are antagonistic hormones and help balance your blood sugar, right? Insulin lowers your blood sugar. Glucagon raises your blood sugar. And if you read this is an important distinction. So insulin allows glucose to cross plasma membranes, your cell membranes, into cells. So say you just had a big meal. Say you just ate a bagel or something that has lots of carbs, pasta, and your blood sugar levels are high because you ate the bagel, you digested it in your digestive system, all those sugars went into your blood. Now your blood sugar's high, right? That's what it's supposed to be. Well, that sugar needs to go into your cells, into your tissues. That's where the sugar is needed. So insulin increases the permeability of your cell membranes to insulin. So insulin will, or I'm sorry, to glucose. So glucose will go in, right? Makes sense. Now it's a balance though. If your membranes are too permeable to glucose, they can be leaky and they can leak glucose back out. So you want to be able to adjust the permeability to match what's in your blood. So insulin lowers your blood sugar by increasing the permeability of your cell membranes to glucose. Glucagon, which is also produced by the pancreas, by the alpha cells, sort of does the opposite. It allows glucose to enter the blood from cells, right? Why you would do that, we'll see in a little flow chart in a minute. So insulin lowers your blood sugar, glucagon raises your blood sugar. And again, they're called antagonists because they're balancing out homeostasis. So this just shows where we're talking. So here's the pancreas near your stomach. Here my face is covering up. Well, there's nothing there to cover them. I guess I cut that off. Anyway, the little pancreatic islets in your pancreas. So these would be all the exocrine functions of your pancreas, the digestive functions, and here we're talking about the endocrine functions. Oh, there we go. You know, I knew I had the other half of this picture. Here I have it here. So here are the exocrine cells. Here are the endocrine cells. Here you can see blood capillaries flowing through. Okay, so let's go through this diagram. Let's take some time with this. So this is showing the antagonistic effects of insulin and glucagon. So let's say, well, this says you just ate 4 jelly donuts. That's four is too many, gang. If you eat 4 at once, I'd have an upset time for the rest of the day. Anyway, so your blood sugar is up because you ate 4 jelly donuts. Your pancreas secretes insulin, which stimulates the uptake of glucose from your blood. So it lowers your blood sugar. Your blood sugar goes down. Insulin also, so this is showing your liver. Your liver, so your body can turn glucose into glucagon, into glycogen. There's so many G words. Your body can store glucose by turning it into glycogen, which is like a form of animal starch, sort of. It's a way your body stores glucose. So if your glucose levels are high, what should you do with the glucose? You should store it as glycogen, or you should pump it into your cells. And you keep doing that to where your blood sugar levels go back to homeostasis, which is 90 milligrams per 100 mils of blood. Okay, so let's say that you skipped a meal and that your sugar levels are crashing. What's going to happen? So okay, so you skip the meal, your blood sugar is low, glucagon gets released by your pancreas. Oh my gosh, yes, man, the G words here are killing me. Let's just start over again. You skipped a meal, your blood sugar is low, your pancreas secretes glucagon, which look what happens here. It converts glycogen back into glucose, which raises your blood sugar, right? So it does. So you see what's going on here versus what's going on here. Here your blood sugar was high, so you turn glucose into glycogen. Here your blood sugar is low, so you turn the glycogen back into glucose, which increases your blood sugar. Okay. So the deal with glucagon is basically you have all that glucose stored in your liver in glycogen. Well, you want to break it down, right? Because your body needs it. So your pancreas gives off glucagon, which turns glycogen into glucose. There's too many G words, which raises your blood sugar to get you back to homeostasis. All right. If I were you, at some point, I would pause the video like now, or look at this diagram in your book to make sure you understand what's going on here. Okay, cool. So let's move on. So the pineal gland, we're going to hit this one very, very briefly. The pineal gland is a very small gland in your brain. It's part of the third ventricle, which was around the thalamus, if you remember that from chapter 7. Your pineal gland secretes more than just melatonin, but melatonin is the only one that we're going to discuss for our purposes. Melatonin mainly helps establish your body's circadian rhythms, your awake and your sleep cycles. There's some connection between melatonin and fertility in humans. I'm not even quite sure what that is. So for our purposes, let's just remember pineal gland in the brain, third ventricle, melatonin helps regulate your sleep cycles. Okay, so this diagram just shows a review of all the organs that we've gone through, all the endocrine organs. They're just kind of scattered throughout. Actually, we haven't done thymus yet. Are we going to do thymus? Yeah, we're doing thymus right now. So your thymus gland's in your chest. It's underneath your sternum. It's posterior, so it's on the underside of your sternum. Your thymus gland, so we haven't done the immune system yet, but you have immune system cells called T cells. T cells are produced in response to a hormone called thymosin, which is produced by your thymus gland. Your thymus gland's biggest when you're a kid or when you're a baby. And basically thymosin promotes white blood cells to mature, which white blood cells are part of your immune system, which we'll talk about that. Actually, when we do the chapter on blood and the chapter on the immune system. So gonads, you were talking about ovaries and testicles. We're going to get to these in way more detail in chapter 16. Ovaries produce eggs, testes produce sperm. Ovaries also produce different kinds of sex hormones like estrogens and progesterone. Testicles produce androgens, male hormones such as testosterone. Here we're talking about down here. Estrogens, again, in 16, we're going to do this more. They stimulate secondary female sex traits like ovulating, body hair, things like that. They mature the female sex organs. Breast development, the menstrual cycle, progesterone does that as well. I kind of want to go through this briefly because we've done a lot in this chapter and we're going to hit this later in chapter 16. Progesterone, like I said, is important in the menstrual cycle. It's also important after conception for the embryo to implant in the uterus, and it prepares breast for lactation after childbirth. That's progesterone. So the two big female sex hormones, estrogen, progesterone, they're produced mainly by the ovaries, a little bit by your adrenal glands, but mainly by the ovaries. So androgens like testosterone are responsible for male secondary sex traits like your voice getting deeper, body hair, muscle development, sperm production. Again, testosterone is produced by the testicles. That's all we're going to say about that for right now. We'll come back to that later. So just brief word. So those are the main endocrine organs. We're done with those. There are other parts of your body that also produce hormones. Your small intestine can produce some hormones. We'll see that when we do the digestive system. Your stomach can produce hormones. Your kidneys can produce hormones. Your heart, we mentioned the one that lowers your blood pressure a minute ago, that AMP. So basically, you have endocrine organs, but there's other spots just about your body that also secrete hormones. So they also have endocrine functions. The placenta is an organ of pregnancy. The placenta also produces hormones. Your placenta is very important in maintaining the pregnancy. The placenta produces a hormone called HCG, or human chorionic gonadotropin, which sort of works in concert with estrogens and progesterone and some other female hormones to help maintain the pregnancy. Again, in 16, we'll come back to HCG, but like for example, most pregnancy tests, when you urinate on the stick, what they're looking for is the presence of HCG in your blood, because if you have HCG, it means there's a placenta, which means you're pregnant. Okay, last slide. Let's finish chapter 9. So developmental aspects of the endocrine system. So your endocrine system works really well until you get old. And once you get old, it's like your endocrine system just starts to check out. Menopause is brought on by a lack of female sex hormones by the ovaries. You can have problems with your, remember your blood calcium, calcitonin, parathyroid hormone, your blood regulating hormones, they can kind of get out of whack, which can lead to bone loss, like osteoporosis when you're older. Growth hormone declines with age. So, your endocrine system kind of starts to check out, not totally, you can still do blood sugar and stuff, but it starts to sort of kind of decrease in its functionality as you get older. Yeah. Okay. So on that note, we're going to call this chapter end, and I hope that was helpful, and I will see you guys next time.